And welcome to the Clinton Presidential Center. I'm Lena Hardin, and I serve as Deputy Executive Director of the Clinton Foundation. And we're so glad you all joined us today for the grand opening of Presidential Pets. It's up on the second floor, just one level, and it's a display of animals who made the White House their home. Now, if you want to just tour the exhibit only, the Presidential Pets, you can do that for free, and you have those blue stickers to show that. But if you want to tour the rest of the library, right here at the admissions desk is where you can purchase a ticket to be able to do that. So how many, we have some kids out there, how many of you have an animal at home? Yes, yes. What kind of animal do you have? 2 dogs. And you? What kind of animal do you have? A honey dog? Scotty. I love it. How about you? You do? She said Kathy the dog? Okay. Okay. And what about you? A turtle. How about that? So how many of you think that your pet could be a first pet and live in the White House? Do you think your pet's up to the challenge? Yeah? Well, our special guest today is going to tell us some great stories about pets who did live with a president and his family in the White House. We are thrilled to welcome author Julia Moberg to the Clinton Center, and her parents are here today, David and Kathy, so thank you so much for joining us. Ms. Moberg is the author of Presidential Pets, The Weird, Wacky, Little, Big, Scary, Strange Animals That Have Lived in the White House. And after her presentation, she will be available to answer any questions that you have. So be thinking of some good ones and just raise your hand like you did for me, and she'll choose you so you can ask a good question, okay? And after her presentation, she will be available to sign some of her great books right out there. You probably saw them after the program. So please help me welcome Miss Julia Moberg.
Hi, everyone. First off, I'd like to thank the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Presidential Center for having me here today to take part in this wonderful exhibit. It's a well-known fact that if you want a friend at the White House, you'd better get a dog. Or in the case of some of our past presidents, a cat, a bird, a gerbil, or a horse. All pretty normal pets. But what you may or may not know is that many of our presidents also had pets that were a little bit non-traditional, especially for a president. Some of them owned cows, bear cubs, tigers, a snake, elephants, or even an alligator. Throughout our country's history, the presidential menagerie has included creatures weird, wacky, little, big, scary, and strange. And today I'm going to tell you all about them. Is it working? Thomas Jefferson was our third president. He was also the owner of 2 grizzly bear cubs. During his presidency, Jefferson sent a team to explore the land out west. Led by Lieutenant Zebulon Pike, the team captured 2 grizzly bear cubs, animals that at the time were not found back east. When the expedition was finished, the team brought the cubs back with them to D.C. and gave them to the president. Jefferson built them a big cage and kept them on the White House front lawn. He would often take them for walks on leashes. The bears eventually grew too big for the White House, and so Jefferson sent them to live at a nearby museum. This was before there were zoos. Our 6th president, John Quincy Adams, also owned a rather peculiar pet. Perhaps the most peculiar pet to live at the White House. You see, the Marquis de Lafayette, a French military officer, gave Adams his very own pet alligator. The animal lived in a White House bathroom for 2 months before eventually returning back to France. Always the jokester, John Quincy got a kick out of letting guests use the bathroom without telling them what was behind the door. And then there was Andrew Jackson's pet parrot, Paul. Yes, our 7th president had a parrot who was no ordinary animal. For Paul had a bit of a bad habit. Turns out she, like many other parrots, often repeated what her owner said, which is pretty normal. Well, Jackson had a bit of a potty mouth on him, and as a result, Paul cursed up a storm wherever she went. Sometimes she would even curse in Spanish. And as the story goes, she had to be removed from Jackson's own funeral because her swearing was so bothersome to the mourners. Now imagine for a moment that you are our 23rd president, Benjamin Harrison. You have several grandchildren who always come to visit, so to keep them entertained, you buy them a pet goat named Whiskers. You even attach a cart to the back of the goat, and your grandchildren enjoy the game of being driven around. It becomes their favorite thing to do. One day, they are riding around the front lawn when suddenly you notice that someone has forgotten to close the White House gate. You motion to a staff member, but it's too late. Whiskers has already seen the opening and is on the run. You make your way across the lawn as the goat whizzes through the gate and onto Pennsylvania Avenue. A wave of panic hits you when you remember your grandchildren are in the cart. You begin to run after them as fast as you can, through the gate, down the street. You chase them several blocks, waving your cane in the air. Eventually, you catch up to them, and while you inspect the kids for any injuries, you notice what seems like half of the city out on the street, watching you, laughing. Yes, this really did happen to Harrison during his presidency. In the end, his grandchildren were fine, but the president's ego didn't fare as well. For the next few days, the country's biggest newspapers wrote all about our runaway president and the goat he chased down. Calvin Coolidge, our 30th president, also had quite a bizarre pet living at the White House. Along with more than 25 animals, Coolidge owned a raccoon named Rebecca. Originally a present for a Thanksgiving feast, Coolidge felt she was too cute to eat and decided to keep her as a pet. Rebecca was allowed to roam the White House as she pleased, and while most Americans dined on simple food, Rebecca was fed green shrimp, chicken, eggs, and expensive cream. But while the first family fell in love with the raccoon, the White House staff didn't seem to be too fond of her. She had a bad habit of ripping their clothing and stealing money. One day, Rebecca got loose and ran through the White House gates. Whoever was in charge of closing the gates back then sure didn't do a good job. Rebecca the raccoon was eventually caught, but the family feared she would not be so lucky the next time around. So they sent her to live in safety at the National Zoo, and they visited whenever they could. And then there are those pets that had a great influence on some of today's customs and traditions. Take our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, for instance. Legend has it that in the fall of 1863, a turkey was given to the first family for their Christmas dinner. When Tad, Lincoln's 10-year-old son, befriended the bird, this caused a bit of a problem. The last thing Tad wanted to do was to eat his friend for dinner, and so he barged in on a meeting in Lincoln's office to plead for his friend's case. Lincoln took the time to listen to his son and decided to spare the turkey's life. Historians can't prove this is exactly what occurred, but regardless, its effect is seen today. Every year, a turkey given to the president is pardoned in a ceremony at the White House for Thanksgiving. A particular bear cub in the year 1902 was another animal that left a lasting mark on today's society. The ever-popular teddy bear was invented after our 26th president, Theodore Roosevelt, refused to shoot a small bear cub during a hunting expedition. After his refusal, the Washington Post ran a political cartoon depicting the bear as small and cute. This spawned a toy company to create a little stuffed bear. They put it in their storefront window with a little sign that read, "Teddy's Bear," and it was immediate success. Toy companies have been selling them ever since. During his presidency, Teddy Roosevelt and his family had more than 40 pets living with them at the White House. They owned several dogs, horses, birds, guinea pigs, a raccoon, even a one-legged rooster. But probably the most bizarre named pet was daughter Alice's garter snake, Emily Spinach. She named the pet Emily Spinach because, in her own words, it was as green as spinach and as thin as my Aunt Emily. Another pet known for its unique name came decades later during our 39th President Jimmy Carter's term. First daughter, Amy Carter, had a Siamese cat that she named Misty Malarkey Yin Yang. Yes, that's right, Amy's cat was named Misty Malarkey Ying Yang. Speaking of Siamese cats, First Lady Lucy Hayes, wife of our 19th president, Rutherford Hayes, was sent a Siamese cat from the city of Bangkok from the U.S. diplomat David B. Sickles. The cat, named Siam, quickly became a favorite amongst the First family. Historically, Siamese cats were regal pets owned by Thai royalty, and at the White House, Siam carried on this ancient tradition. She was treated like a queen. She roamed the White House as she pleased, ate gourmet food, and made grand entrances when guests came to call. Also, Siam is believed to be the first Siamese cat ever to reach the United States. And I can't give a speech about presidential pets without mentioning probably the most famous cat to live at the White House. Owned by our 42nd president, this cat was also a Little Rock native. Yes, I'm talking about the Clintons' cat, Socks. Socks was adopted by the family in 1991. The story goes that first daughter Chelsea was leaving her weekly piano lesson here in Little Rock when a stray cat jumped right into her arms. She took the cat home with her. During President Clinton's term, Socks often made appearances at schools and hospitals. There was even a cartoon version of him on the White House website. But despite Socks' popularity, the First family's feline did have one enemy. Many of you might know that the Clintons also had a dog named Buddy. Buddy was a chocolate Labrador that the family adopted in 1997. From the get-go, Socks and Buddy did not get along at all. When they were in the same room together, Socks would hiss and arch his back, and if Buddy refused to leave, Socks would sometimes attack the poor dog. Eventually, the White House staff learned to keep them in separate rooms at all times. President Clinton himself joked that he did a better job bringing peace between the Palestinians and Israelis than he did with his own two pets. Yes, like President Clinton, many of our presidents owned a dog, or many dogs in some instances. Imagine for a moment that you are our first president, George Washington. You already own a plethora of horses, dogs, pigs, sheep, mules, turkeys, chickens, cows, and oxen. Your wife, Martha Washington, even has her own parrot. One day you receive word that a friend of yours from France wants to send you a rare pack of hound dogs, dogs of the highest breeding imaginable. You patiently wait as the dogs made the long journey across the Atlantic Ocean. You can't personally meet them at the New York harbor, so you send an escort, a young John Quincy Adams, who is the son of your friend and VP, John Adams. Now, you trust John Quincy to bring the dogs back to you safely, and you look forward to their arrival. But soon after the ship arrives, you receive word that the dogs were too unruly, and John just left without them. Yes, unfortunately, this really did happen to our first president, and to this day, it is not known if Washington ever forgave John Quincy for abandoning the dogs at the harbor. We do know, however, that they were found and eventually shipped to his Mount Vernon homestead. Even though Washington's dogs may not have lived at the White House, man's best friend has been the top pet of choice for our nation's leaders. Sometimes the first dog has garnered more publicity than the president himself. Laddie Boy, an Airedale dog belonging to our 29th president, Warren Harding, is often referred to as the first dog. Newspapers wrote about Laddie Boy's comings and goings, and he soon became the first presidential pet to become somewhat of a celebrity. At the White House, Laddie Boy was treated like a king. He had his own handmade wooden chair that he sat on during cabinet meetings, as well as his very own caretaker. And every year, the White House threw him a big birthday party. Neighborhood dogs were invited, and they even served a birthday cake made of dog biscuits. After the president's death in 1923, newsboys from all over the country collected more than 19,000 pennies that were melted down and sculpted into a statue of Laddie Boy. Following in Laddie Boy's celebrity footsteps was Fala, a Scottish terrier belonging to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, our 32nd president. Fala was front and center during FDR's presidency. He was always by the president's side and traveled with him wherever he went. Each year, Fala received thousands of fan letters from around the world. He was also an honorary member of the US Army, and starred in an MGM movie. A few weeks after living at the White House, Fallow was rushed to the hospital because he was experiencing some intestinal problems. Turns out the terrier had not only the country wrapped around his little paw, but the White House staff as well. And as a result, they were giving him way too many treats. When Fallow returned home from the hospital, FDR declared that he would be the only person allowed to feed his dog. Yes, both Laddie Boy and Fallow were beloved by practically everyone and enjoyed a good life at the White House. But not every first dog fared as well. One of our presidents, Dwight D. Eisenhower's dog, Heidi, was one of the few pets that was sadly banned from the White House. You see, Heidi had an accident on a very expensive rug in the diplomatic reception room. At the time, the rug was worth $20,000, and had it survived today, it would be worth over $160,000. In the end, Heidi was sent to live at the Eisenhower's farm in Gettysburg. She lived a happy life on the farm and eventually gave birth to a litter of puppies. Still, you can't help but feel sorry for the pooch. Speaking of puppies, many of the first dogs throughout history became parents while living at the White House. When John F. Kennedy was president, the Soviet prime minister gave the 35th president's daughter, Caroline, a mongrel pup named Pashinka. Pashinka's mom was Strelka, one of the first dogs in space that was used in the Soviet space program. While at the White House, Pashinka gave birth to 4 puppies named Blackie, Butterfly, Streaker, and White Tips, but JFK used to refer to them as his very own pupniks. Our 38th president, Gerald Ford's daughter, Liberty, also gave birth to a litter of puppies in 1975. Liberty was a golden retriever and a gift from first daughter, Susan Ford. Rumor has it, whenever Ford wanted to cut a meeting short, he would signal to Liberty to go over to the guest, creating a natural break in the conversation. Yes, Liberty was always by the president's side. One night, Ford took a very pregnant Liberty out for a bathroom break and forgot to tell the Secret Service. They got locked out and had to bang on a stairwell door until guards heard and let them back inside. Not too long after, Liberty gave birth to 9 small puppies at the White House. The Fords kept one of them and named her Misty. They gave the rest to friends and family except for one puppy named Jerry, who they donated to a school for the blind. Another litter of dogs was born at the White House while our 41st president, George Bush Sr., was in office. He and First Lady Barbara Bush owned a Springer Spaniel named Millie, who gave birth to 6 puppies during Bush's presidency. Millie and the puppies appeared on the cover of Life magazine, and Millie and the First Lady co-wrote the best-selling book, Millie's Book. The president gave one of Millie's puppies, Spot, to his son, George Walker Bush, who later became our 43rd president. To date, Spot is the only pet to live in the White House during 2 non-consecutive terms. While in office, President George W. Bush and First Lady Laura Bush also had 2 Scottish terriers named Barney and Miss Beasley. The dogs starred together in several short movies that aired on the White House website and won the hearts of millions. However, it seems Barney was quite good at making enemies as well. One day, the terrier caused a big to-do when he was caught on film biting a Reuters journalist. Still, he enjoyed his time at the White House and made friends with many of the staff while he was there. And that leads us to our current first dogs, Bo and Sonny, who belong to our current first family, the Obamas. Both dogs are Portuguese water dogs and are also hypoallergenic, which means they don't shed any hair. This is especially important because first daughter Malia is allergic to most dogs. Bo was a gift from the late Senator Ted Kennedy during President Obama's first term, and Sonny recently joined the family in the fall of 2013. At the White House, both dogs enjoy going on daily walks with the first family, and Bo's favorite food is tomatoes. Yes, since our country was born, presidential pets have left a lasting legacy on our nation. Not only have some of them changed the course of history, they have fearlessly supported our leaders during tough times, and in doing so, they have served our country as selfless members of the American family. Dwight D. Eisenhower said, "The friendship of a dog is precious. In him, I find consolation and diversion. He is the one person to whom I can talk without the conversation always coming back to war. Thank you all so much for coming out today, and thank you again to the Clinton Presidential Center for having me here.
And if you have any questions for Julia, please raise your hand and I'll come to you with a microphone. Does anybody have any questions?
Are there any pets buried at the White House grounds?
That's a good question. I don't believe there are. I'll have to double check that, but I believe the answer is no.
You don't want to use it?
Okay.
Oh.
They don't spay and neuter very much at the White House then, do they?
Probably not, because most of them end up going. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm going to have to look that up. Yeah. I know that they got them from a breeder, but I'm not positive whether they've been spayed or neutered.
Were there any first families that didn't have pets at all?
Yes, there were 2 presidents that we know for sure didn't have pets. Millard Fillmore, he didn't have any pets, but he was an animal rights activist. He co-founded the American Society for Prevention of Cruelty of Animals for their New York chapter. So even though he didn't have any animals, he definitely was an animal lover of sorts. And then the other president who didn't have any pets at the White House was Chester A. Arthur. And even though he didn't have any pets at the White House, one of his favorite pastimes was fishing. So he loved catching salmon. And he also kind of looked like a walrus, so that his nickname was Walrus.
She was asking if there were spiders, if anybody had a pet spiders at the White House.
No, I don't know off the top of my head, but there were several presidents that owned almost basically practically zoos. Like the Roosevelt had 40 animals. So there's definitely a chance that there could have been spiders, but there's not any documents that I know of. Do you have a spider at home? No.
Okay, again, we want to thank you, Julia, for coming down. That was a wonderful presentation. So everybody, please give her another hand.
Thank you.
We want to give you the opportunity to go ahead and get at the
Great.
go to the table where she will be there to sign any of the books you would like for her to sign as you. I really recommend you go do that. Purchase a book if you don't have one, and allow Julia to sign your book. And so, yeah, if she wants to go ahead and do that, and then we appreciate it. Again, after you get your book, if you want one and you want to get it signed, you're welcome to go up and tour the exhibit for free. Also, following this, we have the First Lady of Arkansas, Ginger Beebe, who's going to be here, and she's going to bring her dog, the first dog, Viper, here. So please come back in here as well to meet the First Lady and the first dog of Arkansas. Thank you again for coming. Have a good night.